Are you ready?
Sure.
I like don't even know how to begin because it's not like I do this ever. I wanted to have a conversation with Nate, my partner, about I think you're gonna high five me. This will be an outtake.
No.
About dating a widow. I feel like there is not a lot of conversations about dating in general as a widow. And it feels very taboo, even for me to talk about it or share about it. It comes with all kinds of guilt and shame and lots of negative feelings, and people have a hard time. And there's a small group of us that talk about that I'm aware of. And I think that's growing, which is great. But I never hear anything from your perspective, from the person dating a widow. So when we first started dating, like I brought this to your attention probably way too soon in any normal relationship of, would you be open to having this conversation and getting grilled on all the hard stuff? And you said yes, and here we are.
I did. And if I'm going to be on the hot seat, I hope you don't mind me having a cool beverage to drink. So, but frankly, I'm happy to have it. And I think it is an interesting perspective, and I hope I can lend my whatever insights I have to it and have it be helpful in some way.
Yeah, I think that you are one perspective. I feel like we don't really need to put a disclaimer on this, but I will. This is one person's opinion in one relationship, and everyone is different.
Right.
But ultimately, I hope that some of these are questions from all of you guys that you wanted me to ask Nate, that you were curious about. So I just have a list of questions to read. But my hope is that if you are thinking about dating a widow, if you are a widow in a relationship or wanting to be in a relationship, if you're in a relationship and struggling with pieces of it that are very specific to widowhood, that maybe this will open up a door to have some of these conversations that are not easy to have, and have a better understanding about each other. So we're putting ourselves in the hot seat as the test dummies here. And yeah, hopefully it will help other people in the future.
Sure.
And won't end our relationship in the process.
I hope not. A year in, and if this was what did it, then maybe a problem.
Yeah, that's probably not a good thing. Okay, well, before we get started on the questions, you want
A little intro?
a little
Sure.
intro bio here?
So my name is Nate. I have known Dana for probably the better part of 15 years. I was a friend of Brad's in high school. We were associates, pretty close, but not best friends. And I've known Dana's sister through a friend of mine who got married to her, and been in the same circles for a long time. And I guess personally, I'm the president of a nonprofit association. I love traveling. I love adventures. I love new experiences, and I think that's probably a decent introduction to me.
I feel like this would be an excellent dating profile.
If
this doesn't work out, those are some good qualities there.
Save that part, right?
Yeah. I'll send you that clip. So you pretty much, I was going to talk about how we met, and you just summed that up. So we were friends first. Nate did know Brad. That maybe makes it more complicated, maybe not. I can't remember. I haven't read these questions in a long time, if there's anything that actually covers that. But maybe we'll talk about that.
Sure.
Because I feel like it feels very unique in the people and the circles that I hang out with and talk to about dating, and within the widow groups, that the majority of people are dating random people and doing online dating. But I also know that it's not totally unique, that people date their spouses, friends, or someone in their network. And so, that's the perspective that we're coming from, versus a total stranger.
Yes, certainly. I mean, somebody that I admired very much, and hopefully thought well of me, and the things that we share obviously can be building blocks. So, I understand why that might not be totally out of the normal.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's good. Should we just jump right in? Are you ready?
Shoot.
You ready? Okay, the first question that the audience wanted you to answer is, were you nervous or hesitant to date me because of the fact that I'm a widow?
I wouldn't say nervous specifically. I mean, I guess especially early on, you don't know what the intentions are. You don't know whether this is something that you're looking for, and the place that you are within your own grief. And so I think a lot of that has to be sort of sensed out. You want both people to be comfortable in a relationship, and I tend not to jump to any conclusions about things. And so for me, it was sort of getting to know you a little bit in a different way and understanding what you were looking for. And I think there are probably a lot of people who aren't looking to jump into another serious relationship immediately, or even after a long period of time. And so having those conversations was very important, and important to me. I think obviously it's an intimidating thing because somebody who has somebody who's been the love of their life, and you always have this nagging, creeping suspicion that you have to stack up to somebody else. And I've tried to approach it with the mindset of, I can't be this other person. I can only be the best version of myself. And so if that's good enough, then that's a compliment ultimately. And so, certainly there are some mental hurdles that, again, you just don't, mostly internal, never that you made me feel that way, or, that felt like it was foisted on me, but certainly that, I wanted to be in the right space to be able to think of this as its own relationship, and one that, I could have a lot of confidence in, because, in fact, by having been in love and had a successful marriage, knowing that you're capable of it. I think that's what a lot of people are concerned about when they get out into the dating world, is
Especially at our age.
sure, and I've been divorced, and so I think figuring out and sensing what the other person is looking for and what they're ready for is always important. But there's certainly a maturity level that I may not have had in the past that might have been overwhelming to have to think about that and have that in the back of my head. But I was very much at a point where not only was I comfortable with you and the closeness and the friendship that we had, but seeing your writing and seeing you talk a lot about what it's like to be a widow and have this awful situation foisted upon you, I felt like I had a really good hold on the type of person that you were. And as a result of that, it gave me comfort that through dedication and communication, that this could progress to something that I think we both acknowledged that we wanted, which was a forever relationship. So I may make it sound a little bit too logical and easy, and I don't mean to, but I do want it to be, those were the foundations of it, was being willing to talk about it, and also just having that perspective of people in love and what they're looking for. So
Yeah, and I think you make a good point of, you followed my journey because you knew me and you knew Brad, and you were still very close, still are close with my sister and her ex-husband, that you got to see my writing and this unfold for the internet throughout this. So I think, it's a little bit different. But if now I'm going to ask you to imagine that you didn't, because I do think that was something you knew, like so much of who I was and what I prioritized and the way I lived my life based on what I shared openly, like with the world.
right.
But if you were to represent all people that are looking to date a widow, you are that person.
Take that mantle.
When do you think, if it was somebody they didn't know in advance, they didn't know they were a widow going into it, when should somebody drop the widow bomb? Like, is that in a dating profile? Is that in an early conversation on a first date? Is that like once you know your story a little bit more? Do you have a...
Yeah, I mean, I would say when you're comfortable, first and foremost, but regardless of whether you have some sort of foundation of a relationship with a person, having been friends, or whether it's a totally new person that you've met for the first time and, see across the room at a restaurant or something like that. I tend to think that the best relationships are are based on open communication and dialogue. And, if you're on a date, and I have very little dating experience, to be honest, it's almost.
You have
makes me
relationship
uncomfortable. I
experience.
have a lot of relationship experience, but I've never been, in that type of scenario. But, I have to imagine that the promise of a good relationship is probably rooted in the early conversations that you have with somebody and the questions that you ask them, and in a genuine, eager desire to know them better. And so, I think obviously I would never advocate for being insincere or disingenuous about this type of thing. I mean, I think we all know how that can, affect a relationship, but that seems like something that will come up relatively quickly. And, especially as you're learning about somebody and you're, have you lived in this place for a long time? And, what do you love about it? And, what are your favorite things to do? And, what are the things that make you happy? And I think, it's not that you have to volunteer that information immediately, but it's also probably something that is worth acknowledging, because it is a central part of a person's life. And, personally, I think, again, I had the benefit of knowing a lot of your history and your story beforehand. And I think I would have wanted to know relatively upfront, just, again, what makes this person tick? What is their history and background, and what are they
But
looking
it's
for,
like,
you
what makes me tick is talking about death.
Well-
it's so nice to say it in that way.
Sure.
But maybe it's the, what was your last relationship? How did it end? And then you get to be like, well, death
Right.
happened.
And I do think, I mean, obviously there's the old trope about, like, you have a date with somebody and all they're talking about is their ex. And it's very different, obviously, from having, a relationship that didn't work out. You break up with somebody, they're still around, generally. And that might be a warning sign. It's like they seem to concentrate a lot on it. I don't think it carries the exact same, indication for somebody like me. But at the same time, I think it would also, I would want to know, and it doesn't mean that I'd want the entire conversation to be solely around that. But I do think it's something you get, once you understand it and you know it, and there's a, being able to think about it internally, surprises are always hard to, it's like, you want an immediate reaction to something. But that's not realistic. Your immediate reaction is not always going to be your actual feelings about something. So, I again, can't speak for everybody, but, clearly, if it's all you talk about with the person, then they may feel intimidated or afraid. But I think it's something that you should be open to volunteering, because it is a very important part of your life, of a person's life. And the acknowledgement of it allows that process to start. Then you start thinking about, oh, well, that's really lovely that they had this great relationship, and what does that mean for what you want in the future? And I think it again can be a foundation for important conversations, and frankly, it may thrust important conversations into the spotlight, because you don't often get the opportunity to talk about really serious things right off the bat. And I think that's a great way to be able to get to know somebody, is having these questions that really get at the heart of a person's experience and their way of looking at the world. So
Give so much credit to the people out there in the dating world.
yeah,
It sounds so lovely, and if only that was how it, I don't have a lot of experience being on dates because I hated it, but what I can tell you is it's extremely uncomfortable to have to tell anyone, even like new people I meet as friends, is super awkward, let alone a date. And I love what you said, because I am a believer of like, well, great, that'll weed you out if you can't handle this.
right.
And I think the hard thing is also what you said, where it's like someone's going to react because they were just, a bomb was dropped, because a bomb was dropped on our lives, and they're going to have some reaction. And I think we give so much weight to that, of like, oh, they didn't know what to say, they were stunned, you're out. And the
Yeah.
longer I've kind of been in this and reflected on this, it's like, we've got to give people, that's like the only thing, we have to give people a chance to
Yeah,
take that in, because it is a huge,
right.
I mean, it's frankly, it's like, you have kids, there's a huge part of you that you're bringing into this relationship, that you're telling this person about your life, that will continue to be a part of their life.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, that's the important thing, is that, you know, if you ever get the feeling that the first time you mention it has to be the last time you mention it, then that's obviously a major problem. You know, I think, but some people are better than others from hiding their initial reaction to something. And I
Mhm.
think when you're surprised, you know, people should be forgiven for, you know, even a not a great reaction. You know, obviously a bad reaction is one thing, you know, blowing up and
Mhm.
flipping
But-
tables, but
feeling awkward or not knowing
but,
what
oh,
to say.
and I think, you know, a
Yeah.
lot of the work you do, a lot of the conversations you have are around this idea that people aren't comfortable with grief, and so they don't know how to respond to somebody who's going through a difficult time in their lives.
Even
And
people that know us.
even some of your closest people who
Yeah.
really want to be there and
Yeah.
supportive, they still don't know. You know, you as a griever probably still have that feeling like, I really would
Every
like to
time.
say the exact right thing at the exact right
Yeah.
moment and be there. But I mean, to the extent that I'm having a conversation with anybody, I mean, I would just say to the you know, daters out there, the ones who are in a relationship or getting into a relationship with somebody, be an active listener. Don't immediately be like, well, you know, that has me worried, that has me concerned. Give the opportunity for somebody to talk, and then it's great to be able to say what you have to say too, and what you're thinking about, what's going through your heads, especially in the context of a conversation that has to occur at some point if it's going to go anywhere.
Mhm.
And it's also okay to date and not intend for that to be where you're going. But if
Right.
you're looking for something that lasts longer than a night or a week, then be willing to have those conversations and listen to people, because I think, you know, your mind may be racing, but at the same time, do your best to try to take in what's being communicated.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're just looking for a couple dates, a good time, sex, this is a totally different conversation than you are looking for a partner. You're looking to share your life with somebody. And yeah, I think you drop this bomb, and even if that conversation doesn't necessarily go deep in that first conversation, it's allowing hopefully that person to ask questions and feel uncomfortable, and like providing that space. And that's something I think is a little bit on us. And it goes back to like all of grief literacy. It shouldn't be on us to hold people's hands and lead them into this, but it might have to be. And so I think having patience, if like this person's checking all these other boxes and you feel really good about them,
Right.
then be understanding when they fumble through not knowing what to say.
Yeah.
When it's like, oh, you're not just like a 20 something, a 30 something, like this young person that just broke up with your last boyfriend or
Right.
girlfriend. You've been through this profound loss, and that's going to take a minute for somebody to process. And
Right. And, you know,
Yeah.
not everybody has the strength of having gone through the type of thing that you've gone through. And so, you know, it's important to forgive them for not having it. I mean, you know,
you could be the first person that like they've
Right.
ever met that's been through this kind of grief and loss.
Exactly. And, you know, it's just, I think it's pretty crucial for people to understand that strength to be able to talk about difficult things comes from practice and experience. You know, it's something you can
Yeah.
cultivate in yourself. It's not natural to everybody. And, you know, you never know where people are coming from until you ask and you listen and you find out more. So,
Yeah.
so again, you know, that initial, you know, eyes going up or something like that is doesn't
I hope
mean-
they like hold that in a little bit.
Of course you hope so, but at the same time, it is, you know, shocking things that feel like they shouldn't happen, astound us all and
Yeah.
make us all sad and upset. And so that could be, you know, don't read too much into it. That the reaction could be genuine, you know, empathy and just, sadness rather than shock and concern, which, again, they may look similar at times.
Yeah, I mean, I will add though, I think if you have not been through this is my own personal experience, and so this is not for everybody. But if you have not been through any kind of loss, and that doesn't have to be death, it doesn't have to be the loss of a spouse, but if you haven't been through hard stuff in your life, I think it's going to be hard to relate. Like, I think it's going to be hard to understand as much as you might want to. And I feel like maybe, it could be a divorce, it could be the loss of a relationship in that way that's different, but you understand like grief.
Mhm.
And if nothing bad has ever happened to you, if you've been through zero hardships in your life, which is if you're in your 20s and you're a widow, if you're even in your 30s, maybe like a grandparent died or something when you were young, it might be hard, like for a relationship to work unless you are very, very good at communicating, like on both sides.
Yeah, and maybe even the other extreme, if you've been through so much difficulty and trouble and turmoil and loss, then there may be a numbness to it that, again, you have to
That's true.
you have to sort of feel out whether how you want those conversations to go, and how you can be open to having them and supportive of them. So
Yeah.
Again, it just really depends, and I think you sort of need to be able to understand and play the room a little bit with the person that you're interacting with. So
Yeah. Which is necessary for any relationship,
right,
grief or
any
otherwise.
conversation, and
Talk
every
about it.
situation. Right, talk about it.
So you touched on this a little bit, but with me, you're not just dating a widow, but someone who is very open in how I talk about grief, how I write about it. I've created a business surrounding grief and widowhood. So for now, there's quite a few people that I know that are in this grief space as widows. Is that hard for you? And do you have any words of wisdom or advice for other people who are maybe in that space where it's not just coming in and having a past that's like here, like Brad exists in my personal life. It exists everywhere. I write about him.
Mhm.
I talk about him. I connect with other people about him.
Yeah.
Like, what is that like for you?
I mean, considering the alternative of not having an outlet to talk about this stuff and be able to work through it. And, I know that you found it, initially you started writing about your loss just to yourself in a journal,
Mhm.
and then finding your voice to be able to talk about it because you thought it could be helpful for other people who were going through something that is taboo and not talked about.
Yeah.
Considering the alternative, I just wholeheartedly support your effort in doing it and admire you so much for the
Mhm.
strength to be able to have those conversations, because I know they're not easy. I can't imagine that they'd ever be easy. And, as somebody who is, I feel like pretty attuned with my feelings, I still would feel like it was hard and difficult to share those publicly. It's not something that I've got experience doing. And so, I think there certainly are things about it that can be challenging. But my understanding with you and understanding what you're trying to do is total admiration rather than resentment. I don't resent you're talking about this, lovely relationship that you had. I admire it. And yet I think it's also important, again, to be able to have that conversation with somebody, especially if you're expressing these things consistently, that you want to know that you're also special, and that there's some space that's left for you that is not the entirety of the online persona, which again is a very different thing, and I think needs to be acknowledged. That all of the wonderful work that you do is very laser focused on an experience and a set of experiences and a group of people who share them. And it doesn't mean that there's not room in the rest of your life outside of it to, cultivate a real meaningful connection with somebody else. And so I think the younger me would have probably been a little more, jealous or anxious about what that meant. But if you can understand where the person's coming from, what the intent of it is, I mean, then you have an opportunity. And if it's not there, if this really is just a, this is something that I'm gonna never be able to move on from, that's okay too. And it just, you need to understand where you potentially fit into it.
You're saying that as you, the person dating the widow, if they can't,
Yeah, no, sorry,
Like-
and then I use a phrase, move on, that's not exactly what I meant, but it's something that, again, what is,
like, you
What
need
is-
to move on from and accept that's like
well,
what I'm doing.
I think we all need to move on from certain feelings that are hard to move on from. And that's not, I'm not talking about love and, losing a
Yeah,
husband or a
I
wife.
didn't take it that way. You've been dating
I
me
wanna
long
be-
enough to
yeah.
know
Well, I wanna be
that you're not
careful.
suggesting I'm moving on from Brad.
Words matter, and so I want to be careful about it. But again, those are the things that a person may be a really wonderful person and also not be able to work with what you've decided you want to do with your life. And that
Right.
applies to any variety of things, and
Right.
not this specifically, but so
It-
if you're willing to talk to them about it and say, I'm feeling kind of low right now because I feel like I'm not a part of your life. I feel like I'm not special. I feel like I'm not a central figure in what you do. Then have that conversation. I think, it's easier to come to an understanding about something if you are able to have frank, open conversation about it. And I think that's just generally a relationship thing
Yeah,
across the board, is that you have to be able to ask questions, you have to be able to listen to answers and not immediately get upset or defensive. And that's hard. It's very hard not to,
yeah, in an emotional space and topic.
especially when there's love there. I mean, it's the people that you love that hurt you the most, even with trivial things. That's the stuff that you need to work through. And it can be worked through with, the time and attentiveness that's required for a really meaningful relationship. And
Yeah.
and so clearly it's not like a simple snap your fingers and I think about the sea, I think about the sunshine and it all feels better. But it's important to be able to be okay with that. You may feel hurt, and also as long as you can communicate it, then you can come to a consensus about how you deal with it.
I mean, I'm also just like, maybe this is me just, I think if you're not okay with it and you can't be okay with it and you're in the space and this is your job, you're just not the right relationship. Like,
Sure.
and maybe that can shift, but it's like, how much energy do you have trying to convince someone to understand that this is a piece of their life? And maybe if you're feeling that way, then you're right. I'm not prioritizing you in like real life instead of this like
Yeah.
box of Instagram. But I'm gonna push you a little bit harder because I feel like this is just like all the nice, right things to say.
Yeah.
But I also like would imagine like when you, even though like Instagram is like specific for this business and in this space, and it's not like the life of Dana, it is talking about grief, and even like vacations get like that grief spin on it, and bringing it up. But is it still hard to like look at something where it's like, this is the only like public thing about myself I put out there, and to see more of somebody else, to see more of Brad versus you, to not feel represented? And there's like every once in a while you pop up, but like I imagine that would be hard.
Yeah, no, it's
Like,
it's
even if
not
you're
that it's always
understanding
easy.
and-
Yeah, for sure. It's not that it's always easy. And again, I've had the benefit of context and history.
You came in knowing
I came
that
in-
this is what you were signing up for by dating.
I came in knowing, and even though it was never really felt like that this was something that would happen, and the fact that it did happen, I had an understanding and I knew the person, and so there were all sorts of advantages. And I do think that there are bright red flags to somebody who says, look, can you just stop, and get over it, and
When are
stop
you gonna be
talking
over
about it?
this?
And yeah,
Don't say that.
that's exactly, I mean, again, that's not the attitude you have to go into it with. But being in my late 30s, loving myself and having a newfound sort of confidence in who I am and a comfortability with me and my own skin, that has obviously been very helpful,
Yeah.
that even when you get that creeping, hair standing up type of feeling about, jealousy or whatever, it's much easier to push back on that when you feel like you are worthy and worthwhile
the
and a good
work.
person. And shit, that's the hardest part of all of it, and that is way beyond relationship.
Yeah.
That is just, how do you sit in your chair and not be, tapping your foot and, wondering about all the things that you do wrong every day and the mistakes that you make and how you don't stack up to yourself. But so that's the hardest part. I think if you can somehow identify somebody who feels comfortable in their own skin and, I don't even know that confident is the right word, because I feel unconfident every day, about certain things.
Yeah.
And yet I feel very much like I'm deserving of love and that I'm a good person and that, I have a lot of wonderful things about me. And so you hang your hat on those at the end of the day, the things that you aren't good at, or you feel like you wish you were different about, they'll stick with you, they'll nag at you all the time,
Yeah.
but they don't have to dominate your life. And so, seeing things around your house that are Brad and that are connecting you to Brad, I try to think of them as just lovely testaments to love and your capacity for love and your ability to be in a loving relationship. Relationships are hard, you get them with your family, and sometimes even those are not good relationships. They can be very destructive, and you have every opportunity over the course of your life to build those relationships with non-family. You sort of have to be really open to the understanding, the noticing of differences and the acknowledging of them, and then also, what does this mean to a person and why is it important? And so find those things in your own life. And it's a t-shirt that maybe one of your ex-partners bought you, and it's like you still have it in your drawer or something like that. How is that?
I mean, I think that's a good point of like, if you're walking around wearing a t-shirt from your ex, I'm gonna have a problem with it. And if you have a problem with me wearing one of Brad's t-shirts, I'm gonna get really mad. Like, and that is the double-edged sword of like, you can never, like, that is the thing I will have forever of like, well, he's dead. Like, and I feel like I've thrown that in your face in like a weak moment one time in our relationship, but not that I can remember. But I know there is that when I'm upset, when I'm feeling like I just want to lash out, that's a very easy place for me to go.
Right.
Of like, you can't argue. You are no longer allowed to argue.
It's a trump card.
Yeah.
All trump cards, for
Right.
sure. But and again, there's no malice in it, and I choose to look at it that way.
Because you're more mature than most and understanding.
I mean, again, I think there are a lot of people out there who can get to that point, and just to expect it to happen immediately may not be realistic. There are people out there who are ready for this, and for a number of reasons, can immediately be available emotionally.
Yeah.
And yet, I think whether it's losing a partner, or whether it's, a former partner who has not been, who's not passed away, you have to acknowledge that any memory, any experience that they've gone through is part of who they are now. And so, not to quote Hopper from Stranger Things, but it's like,
But please do.
But yeah, that hurt and that pain that may also be associated with something is freeing, because it's you feel something about it. You feel this emotion, and
it was love, or is love.
Right. Because I got to imagine that you see things, notes from Brad and things that he's written, and you feel both immense pride and connection and happiness and sadness and devastation, and those can coexist, and that's with every
I feel like you've been
interaction.
reading some blog posts.
I may have, I may have read and liked and commented on some things. And so I'm a year plus in now. Your words have helped me in a lot of ways, and I try to be better equipped to talk to people who are going through really tough times or have experienced loss. And it doesn't make it any easier
Yeah.
necessarily, but you do feel a little bit more equipped to have the conversations and to be present and to not just be a nebulous, I'd love to help and also I gotta go and,
Just reach out.
yeah, and show up and those things. And, the other old trope about like never go to bed angry, I think it's not a truism. There's a lot of, but there's a lot of important sentiment there that you don't walk away from conversations that are hard. You don't walk away from challenges, and you continue to show up and
Yeah.
continue to be there for them.
See, this is why I wanted to have this like 2 months in, because
Right, I would have
I do feel like,
crying. in the
well,
corner.
not that I want you to say the wrong thing, but I do feel like we've had so many conversations and learned that we are in a really good space with this, that it's maybe not quite fair to people early on that are struggling in a way that I'm like, I'm sure we struggled more, and
Yeah,
and so I'm gonna like
you push me up, press me
well,
on.
yeah, and like talk about like the stuff. People, this comes up a lot. Like you mentioned stuff, and I'm like looking over here at like a framed
Mhm.
note Brad left, and I have a photo over here, and I have things that like from travels. And I don't have a lot of photos of anyone in my house. I'm art and like mementos that mean a lot. So I've never been a person that's like photographs
I
everywhere.
don't know if I'm in any photos here.
Yeah, there's one on my desk.
Okay.
But I think I have one photo of Brad and Dune, and then
Mhm.
one of you and me, and that's
Yeah.
and maybe like with Margot, my sister.
right.
And so it's like, but a lot of, oh, there's Freddie the Eagle.
Oh,
This is a
right.
good sign, guys.
Right. We needed a little.
We needed levity.
Right. Hey, Freddie.
It's getting tense. No, I think a lot of people do. They have photos on the wall. They have, nothing's been changed. And also, I live in a totally different house.
Mhm.
So it would have been very different if we had started dating when I still lived in the loft I lived in with Brad, and everything was identical. Like you're coming into a space that I created for myself. But how much is too much stuff? Is there a point like, and again, imagine it's not our current relationship, but like you're walking into someone's house for the first time and there's photos everywhere.
Right.
Like, is that, I imagine that's awkward, because that is,
Yeah.
that's like, it's okay to feel weird about it. But is there a point where you're like, okay, now some of these need to go, or all of these need to go? Because I know people have talked about that. Like they were dating someone who gets to a point where it's like, you can't have photos here. Is there a point in a relationship? Is it the amount of stuff? Like,
Well,
answer for everyone.
answer for everybody. There's no accounting for taste, right? You know what I mean? Somebody might have, unicorns in every corner of their house, and I would walk into it, I'd be like, well, this is a little strange, and that's nothing
I
against
love it.
unicorns. I love unicorns. It's just as a design choice, you have to, at some point you'll be like, I don't like this, or I do like this. And it's not to be flippant. I think clearly for you, the right answer is that you should be able to decide what you want to have around in your house, and what you derive happiness from. I think, maybe for the widow community, is this thing giving me what I want out of it, which is fond memories, positive memories versus
Yeah.
destructive memories or sadness or whatever, but that's up to your own, estimation. I think clearly if I walked into a house and every painting, every picture was of me, I'd feel uncomfortable with that. So, there is probably
Me too.
some level in my own house. It is like that big posters,
Giant.
right, sculptures of
Yeah,
me.
exactly. Naked.
Yes, David with my face on it. But ultimately, it's totally up to you. I do think it's as a partner, I think, just being prepared and acknowledging it is important. If you feel like you're still in a place where you need all of these things surrounding and everything reminds you of this person, maybe you wait a little while to bring somebody to your house. I mean, again, these are really more coping rather than
it's
prescriptive.
why is it, is it because this is the house you lived in and I didn't change anything until I moved. It's not like I took things off the wall or, Brad's stuff was in the closet until I moved. Like I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so if I hadn't moved, like I'm trying to imagine what I would have done if I would have, because when I was at the time, I was seeing a therapist and talking about the idea of moving. And she gave me very good advice of like, everything you bring into your new house should represent this new version of you. And it was really hard to hear because I was still grieving, like very much in it. And the idea of leaving my loft was really hard and not being in this space. But I think there gets to a point, hopefully, where it's like, what does my surrounding now represent? And that can take a really long time for people to get there because they're holding on to this past life and it starts to feel like a museum, and is that healthy? I don't know. Does that bring them comfort?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just like, I'm refusing to take any steps forward? And I think as a partner, it's like, that's such a delicate thing. You can't just be like, are you stuck in your pet? Like, I don't really know how you bring that up and at what point in a relationship, not early.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to be like, I'd love like this photo on the nightstand where we have sex makes me feel a certain way. Maybe we could compromise. Like,
right.
I think, how do you bring it up in a way where it's like acknowledging, hey, I understand why.
Context
and could we do, put a photo of us here or move this, like, and I think that's different for everyone.
Yeah, coming at it with a solution rather than a complaint is obviously a better.
But even the solution, it's like, ooh, you gotta tread lightly on making suggestions. Like it's also sensitive.
If you think it's a reasonable, thing to talk about, like the nightstand example, and again, you're talking 1 date and 5 dates and 10 dates, and I don't think at that point that's a reasonable thing to start to talk about. As you get to a point in your relationship where like, okay, we're building something lasting, then you should be comfortable having those conversations and
even when they're hard
in an appropriate way too. Is not a, if this is going to work, you basically
I'm forcing you to
exactly, holding you hostage, do this or else, the conversation needs to be like, I can't help but feel a little sad or upset at this, and maybe we could do this, and
be prepared for an initial bad reaction, like, and be supportive, knowing this is going to trigger something in this person,
right? Like the initial dropping the bomb of like, I've lost my life partner. People may not react exactly how you would wish they would, and it does not mean that that's not because they can't handle it and they're not worth investing time and finding out with. So, again, give people grace, because, if you expect grace in your own life, people who ask for forgiveness always expect to also be forgiven for things.
Right.
And so be willing to forgive, and or to, have the challenging conversations and not go exactly how you wanted them to, but take a step back and then talk about it again. And at some point you decide whether or not it's workable.
Yeah. I think these are such golden little nuggets for all relationships.
Right.
Communicate, understand that this is a hard topic for both people,
and I do think
stick around.
This is maybe an annoying thing, because there's not a silver bullet to any of this. It's not, again, it's not like I take my happy place. It's really about restraint and conviction and commitment and conversation and things that take time, but also I feel very confident you can cultivate and work on. And I think we all want to be that even-keeled person, even in times of heavy winds and seas, who's able to sort of think through and do what's best and say the right thing. And you never get entirely there, but
Yeah.
hopefully you give yourself, you have your drink of water and then you put it down and then you respond instead
It's
of
very
just,
obvious you've been married and that you have been in some
and then
relationships.
unmarried
Well,
but
But
it
lessons
takes time.
learned. One thing I do want to say, because I think photos on the wall and this stuff, a lot of times, if you have children,
Sure.
it is the excuse, that is the trump card. It's like, this is their father or their mother, like, it's for them. And I want to say, to represent the childless widows, it doesn't mean it's less valid. Like, I have felt that way, like somehow I'm not allowed to have photographs because I don't have kids.
Mhm.
Like, that's kind of the excuse, like, in the community that I see, is like, well, it's their parent. And so as I'm dating, it's like, well, it's for them. And I'm like, no, it's for me too. Like, this is a person that will always be important and a part of my life. And I just want to say that for everyone who has felt
Right.
like they are not allowed to have these pieces because they don't have kids to do it for, you're allowed to want it for yourself. And that might be a harder conversation with a future partner, and it doesn't mean you're wrong,
Right.
And so I just wanted to put that out there, because
For sure.
it's true. Like, I've got June.
Yeah,
He likes to see photos.
he does. Yeah,
He's in
sure
it.
he does. He can't see at all, but
He is now
would like to
blind.
see
He
them.
would like to.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question, it's totally unrelated. But do you ever feel like my grief is too much?
I think that, I have my days where I'm very stressed about any number of different things. It could be professional or personal or whatever. And there are times where it is hard to feel like to shoulder the load when you feel like your load is too much at that point in time. I think, in the greater scheme of things, I want to be a sounding board. I want to be somebody you can talk to. I want to be somebody you can reminisce about, great good times that precede me. The person who tells you stories about high school or college or whatever. It's like, oh, I didn't go to high school or college with you. I don't know these people, and I don't really care, but I'm gonna sit here intently and listen to you talk about it because it gives you joy. It brings you joy. And I think that's really important to me, is to, leave space for the fact that, we haven't spent every moment of our life together, and nobody has that experience. So there are times where I feel like I've had to say, hey, can we, basically put a pin in this and come back to it? I'm feeling kind of anxious about something else unrelated, and I'd love to talk about this later. I'm going through something right now. And again, that honesty and that self-reflection is not something that comes naturally. And sometimes you do just want to be like, I can't, like I'm feeling really anxious or nervous or hurt or whatever. And okay, it's only because of where I am in this moment in time. And I'm, I'll let's come back to this and I'll be ready for it then. It is, nobody wants that friend who always comes to you. And again, it's a terrible, it's a terrible.
Who complains? Where are we going?
Well, it's the emotional vampire. The person who, as soon as
you're gonna get some reactions on this.
No, it's I welcome them. I'm trying to be honest about where I'm coming from here. But if you feel like you're just not available for it at that moment in time, that doesn't mean that you aren't still a good partner, a good person, and that you won't be available for it. And I think you got to acknowledge that somebody who's going through a really difficult time, even if you're not in the best place, you still need to be there for them and be open and be that sounding board or that rock that you can, whatever you can be. But I think we all have to acknowledge that sometimes we're in a place where we may not be ready for it, or capable of being the best advice giver or solace giver or shoulder to cry on. because we're all going through something at that point in time. So I've never felt like it's, too much, but I do know that, if you're feeling like you're in a tough place, you got to care for yourself too, and you need to acknowledge that. It doesn't mean you love somebody any less. It's like, for me to be a good partner, for me to be a good person to have these conversations with, I also need to be okay. And that just means, we have to be demanding of each other, but we also have to be forgiving of each other, and acknowledge that it's okay if we, wait an hour or wait a day or whatever it happens to be. And that's not maybe a satisfying answer, because sometimes you need right now, immediately,
Well-
without conditions, but it can be hard. And I know that I've been not my best self for conversations, just because I was in a bad place or I wasn't ready for it. And, working towards that is a worthy goal. And also it's something that you just, I think you want to acknowledge that it's not always easy.
I mean, yeah, you bring up so many things, and that is not at all where I thought I thought truly it was gonna be like, no, your grief is not too much for me. That's
Well,
and but here's what I think is so interesting is when you started answering this question, it was grief was not like, in my mind, when I'm at this question that whoever asked is about like the grief moments, that like dark despair that frankly you haven't seen a whole lot of, because we met in a place where I've healed so much and I'm
Sure.
I'm in a much better place. But you talked about grief and associated it with just like talking about memories, which I really appreciate. That this is very holistic. It's not just these dark, griefy moments. It's grief is also sharing these stories and talking about high school or college, or these things that sometimes you're like, I don't know who this is, and this can be a lot. And so I think that's an interesting point, that grief is all of this. It's talking about Brad, it's talking about our life together in a positive way, and these like, I'm on the floor sobbing. And that's what I associate this question with. And
Yeah,
I think
That's
we don't have a lot
interesting.
of those moments, because one, we don't live together or even in the same place. And two, I'm in a different place than if we had started dating year 1, 2, 3,
Sure.
even.
Well, I think it's taken me a long time, as just my personality type, sort of a people pleaser, and I don't love confrontation. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm good at it. I'm good at confrontation, but no,
You're
no,
not.
I'm not.
Terrible. This
But
is the most confrontational like you've ever been.
right, that one sentence there. Yeah, no, I think it's important to remember that your partner is not your therapist, and that obviously you want them to be capable of giving good advice, but also that people don't tell you things so you can solve their problems. And
Mhm.
acknowledging that over the years has been difficult, because you see somebody who's hurting and you want to fix it. That's I know that's my knee-jerk desire is, okay,
Grief
who
lesson
hurt
number
you?
743.
Who
Don't
hurt you? How do
try
I
and fix
eliminate
it.
them?
You
Yeah.
can't.
Who or what hurt you? And let me tell you
Yeah.
why,
Yeah.
let me solve it. That's not realistic. And also, I'm not a trained professional.
Well, and you can't.
And you can't.
You can't.
So,
You can't like bring this person back. You're also my new partner. So it's like, well,
Yeah.
then that means we're not together. Like that comes with so many different.
right, necromancing is not something I studied in college, and it's not really an option. But being a shoulder to cry on is a very different thing. And
Yeah.
what I can provide as a partner, at the very least, is the ability to let you sob and talk and just be in a hard place. And we're all there at some point. And those who experience loss, grievers, are there more than most, at
Yeah.
the beginning especially, and then the middle especially, and then
The end, especially.
at the end especially. So
Yeah.
if you can acknowledge, as again, I'm supposed to be speaking for myself or for those dating widows, if you can acknowledge that your only role in that moment is to be there and to be present, and to be a pillow, or to be a tissue, or to You're right. Then,
Yeah.
then that's, I think that, may not be enough, but it is enough, it's.
Yeah, it won't feel like enough, but it is enough.
But it is enough. And
It's what you can do.
despite all of your, better angels saying, I'm gonna figure this out and
Fix it.
solve it and twist the Rubik's Cube in just the way that all the colors line up. It's like, that's not.
You can just hold this messy Rubik's Cube. Like
Yeah.
that's what you can do is I can help hold this.
And I've never solved a Rubik's Cube,
Right.
so
So
better
I
be
should
fixed.
lower my expectations.
And well, it depends on
Well-
your expectations are. I don't think
No,
you should
I
lower
know,
them,
I know.
but at the same time, you should understand that my best effort is just being what
There.
I can and being
Yeah.
there for you. And
Yeah,
you never know exactly what is needed, but you can know that it's not running away and it's not getting angry and it's not, so
well,
it is a different question, and I see what you're.
no, and I do actually appreciate because I think this is something in partnerships and friendships that I've talked a lot about, but you did bring up like, are you in a place to support someone? And I know if I'm having like a true grief moment, if I am like hysterical, can't get out of bed, I know even if you're stressed and you have a lot going on, you will drop that in and be supportive in whatever way you
Right,
can.
it's a very different thing.
I
for
also
sure.
think it is so important to be like, can I be this person for you right now? As anyone in the life of someone who's grieving, like if we don't have the capacity, if we don't have the space, like I have a friend who, if she needs to unload, will be like, do you have the capacity for this?
Mhm.
And she gives me the opportunity to be like, I really don't. Like, I can't wait to hear what you have to say, but right now I don't. And I think we could all do that, understanding there'll be times where it's like, I'm not in the space to be able to even ask that. But what a great like partnership and with people, any friendship relationship, to respect each other's boundaries in that way and how we grieve to each other, how we open up, what like kind of weight we put on each other, and can I really carry that weight right now? So I like that you brought that up, even though I was super offended by it.
Right,
It is a really good point.
I'm under a lot of pressure right now.
So,
For a
you know,
large portion
Don't
of-
do that to me, but everyone else do that.
Okay, deal.
Okay, moving on because we still have, who knows, we've been talking forever. Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit about friends and family
Okay.
and
yeah.
in-laws. So was it weird because we are in the younger group, there's not a lot of widows. Was it weird telling your friends that I'm a widow? Like, what's their reaction when you tell them like a little bit about me when they ask and they're like, oh, Brad died, like she, how
Well,
did what's their reaction?
yeah, I mean, obviously you want to have those conversations in a, not in the middle of a rave or something like that where it can't get.
What are you doing with your friends?
Well, I'm going to raves, but I guess what I mean is that I've never felt awkward about having that conversation because it's factual. This is what happened. It's not something that I lead with,
Yeah.
like my new partner
Right.
and widow, is X, Y, and Z. What I do think is that, again, it is something that I at least my personal feeling is I don't think I've ever gotten the reaction or even the sentiment of a reaction where somebody was like, oh God, a widow, like that's got to be tough, right? I
Oh,
mean,
that's
like,
interesting.
yeah, and maybe you have that, how does that work for you? Like maybe you do have that
Yeah.
conversation, but they've never been like, you better watch out, like they loved somebody else, like that's not the way that any of my friends, any of the people that I
Well,
care
and a
about
lot of
talk
them
about.
knew.
Well, a lot of them do, but
Many not, yeah.
many don't. And, it's something, again, I don't lead with that, but anybody who I'm close to who wants to ask questions about my new relationship and partner, and that's what I, frankly, I would expect from them, and I would expect it myself, is you hear about somebody dating somebody and you want to learn, you want to hear about them,
Yeah.
you want to learn about them. And, it doesn't have to be the first thing, but, it's part of our story,
Yeah.
this has been a friend of mine for more than a decade, and
Yeah, and
that's how we
everyone's
got
like,
here.
everyone's like, well, what happened? Like, how are you now dating if you've known each other for so long? And it's like, well, she was married. Yeah, it
Right.
will inevitably come up.
People who are not really close friends or good friends will not ask those questions and will not care to learn more, and they'll bring it back to themselves, or they'll just go whatever. I mean, those are people who are, okay, I don't care really if you know the all of the context and the depth of it, but I've never felt awkward so much about having those conversations, because it is just, it's something that, you know, I it's part of who you are, and it's part of how we got to where we
Mhm.
are, and everybody has a, you know, a story about how they ended up together, and this is ours, and
Yeah.
so you know, I do think that there may be people who are very protective and worry about it, but I don't, I think if they're good friends, and they will mostly just want to know how you feel about it,
Yeah.
and if you feel good about it, then they'll feel good about it. You know, they're not gonna cause problems, you
Well,
know.
that's very interesting, because I feel like, I think all of these questions that were asked are from widows, and it just shows how much we feel uncomfortable with it.
Right,
Because
right.
you're like, why would I feel like, why is this even a question? Like, no
Yeah,
one
no,
reacts,
it's
so
not to dismiss the
no,
question at all. I think
no,
it's a
but
great question.
I think it's a great question too, but it just truly shows how, like, I feel uncomfortable every time I tell someone.
Yeah.
Like, I carry that burden every time someone finds out. I'm like, oh my God, how are they going to react? How are they going to look at me? What are they going to think of me? Then they're going to find me online. They're going to see all of this shit. My whole world's here. They're going to make judgments. Like, this is what goes through my head. And it just shows how, like, we carry this and we assume everyone else feels this way. We assume everyone else carries this.
Right.
And so it's actually kind of nice to hear you be like, this isn't, maybe it comes up, but
Well,
is this like an awkward conversation? No. And I'm
yeah.
like, that's great.
And you know, in thinking again, we have a very specific context here,
Yeah.
and certainly, you know, I've heard the horror stories about, like, you know, you tell somebody, and then they tell a whole bunch of people, and then you feel like you're being treated differently, and then you feel like everybody's whispering and talking about this terrible thing, and then
Mhm.
you're not a person anymore, you're a
Right.
set of circumstances,
Right.
and it's like, so certainly understand that, and I think that's why it's not, when I describe you, when I talk about you, that is not one of the top 10 or 20 or even 50 things of how I would describe you, because I think the circumstances, you have exhibited traits of yours in those circumstances, but it doesn't define you. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
your strength and your ability to communicate your feelings and all of these things that shine through in your, you know, in the way that you talk about it. It's not, I don't feel like that's a trait, that is something that occurred and may, you know, strengthen your traits or highlight them, or shine a spotlight on them. So, you know, I can understand, and think it's a very important question, but I also feel confident in the people that I love, you know, in hearing about it, are not going to then immediately be like, okay, you know, okay, this is widow first, and then Nathan's
Yeah.
partner second, and then, you know,
But
whatever.
again, I think that goes to like the difference in like the shift in perspective of, like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, everyone will associate me as widow first,
Yeah,
XYZ, versus the rest of the world. And again, like, maybe that's is the takeaway, is we all are more consumed in our own shit
and
anyway.
what's the context in which you meet somebody? I mean, you know, Olympic gold medalists, some, you know,
I'd
okay,
love to be known as that.
right, and that's something that's like, okay, that's one small thing of their lives, but
Right.
is
But
not
they're a
that.
horrible person.
Right, they could be a whole bunch of things, and it's like, the farther away you are, the bigger that part of them may
Yeah.
seem, and so anybody who loves me and is going to be mostly concerned about our relationship and our love and that stuff, and not these other things, which, as big as they are, that's not, you know, that's
From
not
their
really
perspective,
from their
yeah.
perspective, that's
And
not what matters to them.
do you feel like it's the same with your family? Someone else asked about that too, about what your family thinks.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, our story is a unique one, but, you know, it's probably, there are others out there that are similar. I'm sure that, you know, again, friends of widow's former spouse or spouse. I've got a great relationship with my family, and so
Yeah.
that's one thing. Others may try to twist it or act like they're protecting you or whatever, and I never had to really
You
go
didn't
through
have
that,
that,
but I
yeah.
think, the message to them is, you know, I think we all can acknowledge this is an awful thing to have happened. Nobody deserves this. And I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm making my own decisions. I'm capable of, if there's somebody who's trying to counsel you to like, don't do this, then
I
my
want
God,
names.
why would you want that person in your life? Like
Yeah.
again, like they know better than you, having never sat in your shoes. So
Yeah.
I think just you need to be confident in the fact that the people who you love and the ones that are worth keeping around are only going to be concerned with the strength of your relationship and the capacity for your love.
Again, I think you just have like spectacular people in your life, and
Yeah,
and that maybe
you're not,
I know that you have like just
well,
scissor. So okay, we're gonna keep going because you just have your family's great, and I mean they truly are like
I have no real insight. So
yeah. Well, I think that this is probably something a lot of people deal with, and maybe we just are not the best for this to speak to
and I
it.
think there may be certain types of people, whether it's religion or of some sort of other ethos, where they have concerns about that sort of thing. I mean, people might have concerns about me because I was divorced. Well, it's proof that this person can't handle a real relationship, right? Look out for this person. And fine, that's okay if you want to tell somebody you love, like, just be careful. Like, okay, as long as it ends there. I think people, something that I don't think anybody I don't see how somebody could hold it against you.
Yeah, and I don't think it's holding it against you. I think it's just assuming all kinds of things. And so
yeah,
I don't know.
Understand. Yeah.
So one more question. What is your dynamic with Brad's family, with my in-laws?
I mean, again, I think I've been incredibly fortunate. They're wonderful people, and Dave, his twin brother, I've known as long as I knew Brad. Since maybe we were 15 years old, or I was 15 years old, and so it gave me a leg to stand on. I think in some ways just a benefit, but I think what I feel very strongly is that when you get the opportunity to meet people who either loved Brad, who are related to Brad or whatever, that you are you be yourself, and you just are as kind as possible to them, knowing that this is not easy for them. This is not something that's easy for them, as much as you feel like, well, how hard is this for me to be put in this situation? I'm in the situation because this person loves me and they wanted me to meet these people. And if I can show them that I'm a kind person who treats somebody they love with kindness all the time, and does everything they can to make them happy and support them, and be dependable for them, do that same thing with their family members, do that same thing with their friends. And if they feel like I'm not worth having around, or I've got some inherent flaw, I'd love to prove them wrong, because I think I'm comfortable enough in myself that I feel like I'm a catch, and whatever. And that's a hard thing to you get internally. But a lot of my answers probably are around that idea, is like, you have to be a good person. You have to feel like you're a good person. And so
okay, I'm gonna push again.
Yeah, please.
And that's all lovely, great. I also, so you have come on vacation with Brad's family.
Mm-hmm.
Brad and Dave, his twin, never missed a birthday together while Brad was alive, and so we could carry on this tradition, and we try and spend the birthday together. And so you came on this trip, and and I know you, like, there's a moment where you felt like, am I the outsider? I feel like I'm intruding. Like, we've talked about this, that was difficult. And so I do just want to push a little bit of, like, even though you're confident in who you are and you treat me so well, and that is enough for them to see, and you come in with that confidence, it doesn't mean it's not hard for you.
Sure.
To come into that kind of environment.
Yeah. And, I think it's a great point, because I know for a fact that it was not the easiest
And we
thing.
got into a big fight because I was stressed because it brought up a lot of grief stuff
Yeah,
and you felt like you were there and maybe didn't belong. And
I was
it
there
was
to
it was a hard
be,
time.
I wanted to be there to be supportive, and I
Mhm.
also, knew several of them, and cared about them too. And I also felt like there were times where I needed to take a back seat and not, not insert myself. I mean, if I had been trying to be the court jester the entire time, I think it would have cheapened the experience
Yeah.
of people getting together. And so, yeah, no, it doesn't mean that any of this is easy. Ultimately, it's sort of, you have to acknowledge when you don't have the capacity to be that person that you need to be, and then take the time to like
Yeah.
go take a nap or go read a book or just step away from the situation and come back and have the conversation later on about your own insecurities or
Yeah.
needs or whatever. That again, that's easy to say in retrospect, because there were tough
Yeah.
times, and there were times where it's like, do I belong here? But it wasn't because any specific person was making me feel
No. Yeah, not at
it
all.
was more just like, I want to be a net contributor to this opportunity to hang out and spend time with people. Like, quality time is, I think, the most important thing that you can give. And if I'm not able to make it quality on my end, then I need to give myself time to, get into that space. So,
Yeah. Well, I also think what you talked about with it, it's one thing for you to come in as my partner, and it's also very difficult for all of Brad's family, as much as they probably would disagree. But it's like there's lots of nieces and nephews that are little, some that did not exist when Brad was around, that this idea of you being Uncle Nate, you bonding with them, like as much as they love you, that's a different level of like grief of like, they love you for me, they love you being Uncle Nate for their kids, they love having this relationship with you. And also like, that's very real
yeah.
of like, you are a person that's not their brother.
Yep. And I think, whether myself personally or whether family members or just across the board, there is this inclination to worry that you're a replacement or something.
Yeah.
Feels like you're a
Yeah.
replacement or whatever. And that's insidious. You start thinking about, well, do I measure up to, this really high bar that's been set before me? And you just ultimately, you got to shut that down yourself in some way. You got to just say, that's not what
Yeah.
this is. It's not what, even if somebody might have the feeling briefly that that's John's, he's not actually an uncle. He's just an interloper. If you're hungry, you think everybody hates you. If you're tired, you hate everybody. It's like, just give yourself that time to, take a step back. And that it's also is, for those who are dating widows, it's a great way to feel like, if you feel a little bit out of place, or if you feel like there are conversations happening where people are getting the opportunity to reminisce and to honor and to celebrate somebody, go find the little kids, go and play with them, and go and entertain them so that their parents can get that opportunity, because that's what the get-togethers are for. That's what the family moments are for. And so, be the little babysitter, be the clown and make bad jokes and pretend to eat a rock. And that's sort of I think it's.
Did you do that?
I did.
Well, I also think it's such a hard place for me to be in, bringing you into this environment with Brad's family and trying to balance, like, I feel incredibly awkward, and I'm a person that's very close with them, and you're very close with them, and it still feels awkward of like, do they think that Brad is not important? Do they think you're replacing Brad? And even Margot, my sister's kids, this idea of like, they will grow up knowing you in a way that they never knew Brad is really hard. That will be hard forever. I love that you get to be a person in their life and they get to know you, and I will grieve that they won't remember
Yeah,
Brad.
they
And like
lost
Kennedy
opportunity.
wasn't born and Miles was so little, and it's like they were, and same with, you know, Dave and Lindsay, Brad's siblings, their kids, and Jeremy, Brad's best friends, you know, his daughter, like it's both of those. It's like, I love that they have this person in their life, and also it's, it will always be hard.
Yeah.
It will always be hard.
And it's, you know, it's a great point, and it is a real sad thought, you know, to have them miss out on somebody who would have been a great influence in their lives. And yet there's nothing I can do about that other than be a great influence in their lives for the time that I get. you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah. And you do a great job of that.
well, I appreciate that. All right. But that's the goal. You want to impact people's lives in a positive way, and you know, have them think about you in that
Yeah.
regard, in that context.
Okay. Last little bit here. You ready? Okay, you're almost done. You're almost done.
Okay.
Okay. Now that we've been dating for some time, is there anything you wish you knew ahead of time? Anything that you know now that would have been useful for those that are just starting to date a widow? Like something you wish?
It's a great question. And I think if I were to answer that honestly, it would really just be reiterating a lot of the things I said earlier. I think one, you need to be able to take a step back and not immediately act on your knee-jerk emotions about things, because a lot of your, you know, animal instincts may be to protect yourself, and they are originating from some place of you know, internal angst or lack of confidence or whatever. And I think if something is said or something is done that hurts, you know, take a moment to really think about it and try to understand it from your partner's perspective. I think that's very important, because you do just want to, at some point you want to say, be like, oh, really? You know, that hurts me a lot, and you probably don't care or whatever. And it's like, no, they care intimately about that, and they probably didn't realize that it hurts, and also they didn't intend it to hurt, and also this is part of their process of talking through and working through things. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, again, don't lash out, give yourself time to think through and process things. And if you're feeling like you're in a place where you can't have that conversation, again, whether it's an argument or whether it's just being upset or feeling down, give yourself the grace of time to be able to think through and then have a more centered conversation around it. I think, you know, if again, in my more immature days, the idea that, you know, you are being compared on a moment to moment basis with somebody who's not around is really insidious, and it will eat at you if you allow yourself to continue to think that way.
Yeah.
And so, you know, your goal by signing up for a relationship is not to replicate somebody else. You're not an actor in a play. You are yourself. And if they want to be with you, it's obviously something worthwhile that they see, and that is something that you should want to cultivate and just have more of, you know, funny or talented or you know, a great lover, whatever it happens to be. So yes, and
Not me. Funny, talented, great lover.
Don't speak from personal experience. But you know, and I think, you know, overall, a lot of what you talk about in your work with Forced Joy Project is just really important. Everybody processes things differently on a different time frame. You don't get to dictate theirs. And the moment you start saying that you need to do this or else, then I think you need to have a much more honest conversation about,
If you ever said that, it'd be curtains.
curtains.
You need to do this or else. No
Well, that
one,
was actually just,
no one say that
but
to
you
anyone.
just said that. Just
No,
that
I
you-
didn't.
If you ever did that.
Oh, I did.
Okay.
Well, that's different. Not you need to, but if you
Right.
ever do this.
Well, it's good.
you
Fair
know,
warning. That's good.
Fair warning.
It's a warning as opposed
could
to
be-
ultimatum.
Fill in any blank.
Yeah.
Don't ever say that to me.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, and also, you know, lastly, yeah, if you go into a relationship with a widow, or again, with somebody who's gone through trauma or loss, and say to yourself, well, in a couple years, this will be over, this won't be important, this won't be XYZ, then you're going about it all wrong. You like, this is not, you shouldn't be trying to shut out somebody's intense personal experience and, a part of themselves that they really love and value. You need to find a way to make it part of your personal experience, and allow them to cultivate it and cultivate it with them. Again, I think with all people who lose somebody important, asking them about their loved one and asking them to tell the stories is going to get you a lot farther, and going to make you a lot happier than it would be to say, I'm just uncomfortable with you talking about this person because you're supposed to love me. How could you do this to me? There's no greater indication that you're a self-centered asshole than to make it all about you. And so,
Well,
and that's not to say that, again, the animal instincts, the inclination is to make it about yourself and to be protective of
yeah,
yourself.
it doesn't mean it's not hard.
It's not easy for
Yeah.
sure, but it's so much worth it to get to know somebody and to actually understand them. And
Well, and I think that's the point. Like, we haven't actually talked about this, and I know we're wrapping up, but I am the partner to you because of not just
Right.
the fact that Brad died, but because of the relationship that we built together, because of the trust that we had in each other and the love that we had.
and the things you
And
value as a result of
right.
it.
And so this like beautiful relationship we had, because before that, I was like, I don't trust anyone. I was like, not a good partner. I am who I am because of this lovely, wonderful relationship I had with Brad. And so if you come in and you're like, I don't want to know anything, and this makes me very uncomfortable, you're cutting off who I am. Like, you're cutting off a history that is who I am, that you are dating now. And some of it is the loss too. Like, that certainly shifted who I am. You're getting that, not just the version of me that was married to Brad, you're getting the version of me that lost Brad.
Yeah.
But if you're uncomfortable with that, I don't want to just be like, maybe you're not the right person. Like, you can learn,
Yeah.
but maybe you're not the right person. Maybe it's not the right time. Like, this stuff isn't going to go away. Maybe people will talk about it less. Maybe life will move forward in a different way. Maybe that will shift.
Yeah.
But like, if that's your expectation, just waiting it out and like hoping not to like go there,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to be
It's
successful.
probably not going to be. And
Yeah.
I don't want to, say something, become the villain here, but I do want to put the onus also on, those who are going through that loss, or, as widows or otherwise. You don't have to be married. You just lose somebody who you were in love with. Try to find ways to make this person feel special to you. I think that's it's going to be a hard thing for them to feel like you had something so special. And as you build a relationship, how could it ever, in the opening moments, in the opening weeks and months, how could it possibly be the same as a relationship that they cultivated over the course of years? And I think, but in that sense, again, you just give yourself the time and the grace. But I think it is important for, to find ways to make your partner who's coming into a situation where they have to acknowledge that they need to put in the work of building a love and a
it's a
relationship.
two-way street. Like, it can't just be on the person coming in.
And if they say that something is hard for them, take them at their word for it. It's not intended to be manipulative. It's not intended to get you to throw away your favorite blanket or a photo on the wall. It's just that they feel comfortable telling you how they're feeling. And so the answer may be, I'm not going to throw that away, but I understand where you're coming from. And now I can think about it and think about my behavior in a way that, if I do want this to work with you, if I do really see a future, then I care about
those things.
And if it's, relationships never work if it's my way or the highway, from both sides all the way around, 365. And so we just all have to give each other some forgiveness and some the ability to work towards that better place that we want to be.
Yeah, and I think, you said something about like not comparing month 1, month 2 with like however long this previous relationship was, 10 years, 20 years, yeah, whatever it was. And I think we as widows, when it's not a divorce, it's not a slow breakup, usually we're under the assumption that you were in a relatively happy place, that you choose to be together. I think there's a lot of expectations going into dating to like find that feeling immediately, like find that comfort level.
It's a vacuum.
Right. And it's like, that is like my piece of advice. And I know this is about interviewing you, but it is like, you're not going to find that on date 1 after you've been with somebody for 15, 20, 30, however many years, where you've been through life and experience life and death and all of this stuff. That takes time, that takes trust, that takes communication. And so be open.
But hopefully you feel a spark.
You should feel something.
Hopefully
Yes,
you
you
feel a
should
spark, but
feel
it's something
really good, but you can't compare it. Like same way you shouldn't be or worried about me comparing you guys. I can't compare you guys. I can't, like Brad and I had 15 years together and we're newbies.
Right.
Like we're early. We're still building
right.
all of this. And so
Can't
it's
start a fire
going
without
to
a
be
spark.
different. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
make sure to work at that every day.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm unmiked.
Do you have any last pieces of anything?
No, just
I think that was such a good way to end it.
Yeah, I think so. Just live with reckless abandon,
I
just
like
give it a shot. Give it a shot and don't be afraid.
Be wild
to,
and free.
to treat right. I'm gonna think of how many more movie quotes can I throw into?
Should we talk
songbirds?
about Stranger Things some more?
Yeah, the second part of
Hopper
this
from
conversation.
Stranger Things, spoiler.
Right, the reveal, Stranger Things reveal. But
All right.
well, thank you for being open to talking to me about it, and I hope that I was helpful and could provide some of my thoughts and insight into what it's like to be
A day in the
the
life,
luckiest guy in the world.
the partner of a widow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm on